It was 6-0. The Penguins hold on to win it 7-6 after a dramatic third period, much more dramatic than they wanted it to be. I'm Matt Gajtka with Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins, and this is Penguins Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Hunter, one of my favorite Penguins games of all time, actually ended 7-6. It was November 11th, 2008. I was at Joe Louis Arena. They came back from 5-2 down against the Wings. Jordan Staal had a third period hat trick, actually two in the third, and then he scored the winner in overtime off a sweet pass from Ruslan Fedotenko. This was not that sort of a game. This was not the fun way to win 7-6. This was the excruciating way to do it. After two periods, I texted you and said, are we going to have much to talk about regarding this game in particular? It turns out we are, not for good reasons, though, as it turned out.
Yeah, I looked like just the 40 minutes was like, wow, this was a classic basically a bounce back performance from the Penguins, and then it all went to crap in that third period. I think if you look at it, I was kind of dumping on the defense a bit, but then after what I kept seeing Tristan Jarry do, I think that was more on him than I think some of the other players. I mean, let's not be like, we have to be honest here. They did stop skating, I think, in that period, and the defensive effort was bad. But I think a lot of that, I saw Adam Gretz tweet this out too. I think a lot of that was on Tristan Jarry. I mean, 7-5 game, 40 seconds left. Why are you going for the empty net when you just allowed 5 goals in a period? That doesn't make any sense to me. You took a penalty, which led to a goal. I think that was the second goal of the game for New Jersey. I think when it was Sid made it 7-3, the Devils responded when it made it 7-4. That was a howler of a goal if I've ever seen that. That was just a very poor period from Jarry. And honestly, man, I'm wondering now, are they going to maybe send him a message and start Casey DeSmith on Thursday's game?
I had a similar thought. I've also had some big picture thoughts on whether it should be nailed down that Tristan Jarry gets the majority of the starts the rest of the way. And I suppose we can discuss that. Before we get to the meat of today's show, though, I want to let everyone watching know that they can contribute their comments, whether they're on YouTube. I already see one from Steeler Nation 412. We'll get to that in a second. Or on Twitter or on Facebook, streaming on 3 separate platforms right now on the Pittsburgh Sports Live at Pittsburgh Postgame brand show. And I'm Matt Gajtka, back with you talking some hockey as we try to analyze this one. 2 separate games, it seemed like, the first 40 minutes and then the final 20. And let's go with the Jarry storyline too, because I thought he was rather casual there late. And I understand, I'm all for goalies going for goals. I don't have a problem with that in general. But those were dangerous situations. And he goes behind the net after he fumbles the initial shot and the chance to shoot it. He can't quite get there, and just very casual getting back to the net. He just didn't look like a guy who was locked in on trying to make that next save. And he had a couple of short side goals. You mentioned the one that made it 7-4. Also, Sharon Govich to make it 7-2 or 6-2. Pardon me. After he blew past Letang shorthanded. So there were at least 2, possibly 3 that are right on Jarry's backside. And I look at Casey DeSmith, and he's been as consistent as can be all season long. And Jarry, even though I've been in his corner for a couple of years at least now, going back to when he filled in for Matt Murray admirably for a long stretch 2 or 3 seasons ago. But you know what? He still hasn't done a ton at the NHL level. So I'm still up in the air about it. And I think a third period like this one reminds all of us that even though the goaltending has turned it around, there's not necessarily a lock here in terms of who gets the start for playoff game 1 once we get there in about a month's time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fully on board Tristan Jarry starting game 1 in the playoffs for the last 2 weeks. Maybe this period gives me a little bit of pause, but, I think the big thing with him is how is he going to respond from this? It's great that you have had 2 goaltenders playing at a pretty high level for these last 8 weeks. I mean, DeSmith, I know he had that bad start in Buffalo, but honestly, I kind of pinned out more like crap than him. I think on most of those goals, he really had no shot. But still, tonight, it was weird seeing him struggle that badly, just moving laterally left to right. A lot of the goals were going blocker side for Tristan. Like I said, that one that made it 7-4, I don't even know what he was doing there. I mean, that's a goal that, we've seen Matt Murray give up a lot of times during the end of his Penguins tenure. That was just, I think, a bad performance from him in that third period. Like I said, that kind of, I guess, masked the Penguins' deficiencies defensively. Obviously, like I said, they didn't play that well defensively in that period, but if they get average goaltending, I think Jay Fresh Hockey just tweeted out, I think Tristan Jarry allowed almost 4 goals above expected in the third period alone.
Man.
That's pretty hard to win a game. They're lucky that they had those 40 minutes where they played exceptional. So do you think they should put Jarry back out there on Thursday, or do you think they should go out and just ride DeSmith out for that game and then maybe have him go on Saturday?
I would alternate the two of them and make it clear to both of them that nothing is for certain right now when you talk about the playoffs and you talk about who's going to be the number one guy at the end of the season. I think that's totally appropriate. And if I'm Tristan Jarry, I can't feel bad about it because Casey DeSmith has outperformed me for the majority of this season, actually for almost all of the season. Like I said, he's been at the top, DeSmith has. When you look at some of the advanced goaltending metrics, goals saved above average in particular, he's right there with anybody in the league, let alone just the number one starters or the guys who've gotten a lot of playing time. Even the guys who have just played a couple of games and have been great, DeSmith is up there when you look at the rate stats. So I think he deserves it, honestly, too. I think that's important as well. And it's important to send that type of a message to the team that the guys who are playing the best are the ones who are going to get the opportunities. Now, in goal, it's even more so. It's even more of an up-for-grabs situation because both players are relatively inexperienced at the NHL level. You're talking Penguins hockey with Matt Gajtka and Hunter Hodies. Hunter hosts the Locked On Penguins podcast. He is locked on the Penguins 5 days a week. Want to make mention of that. And you can find the podcast at LO_Penguins on Twitter. And you can find him on Twitter at his name, Hunter Hodies. Just like mine, we like to keep it simple. When you have last names like we do, usually you can lay claim to the simple Twitter handle. Some comments sizzling in right now. Some talk on Jarry. Irish AJ 1983 says throw Jarry right back out there on Thursday. He wants to see him bury that one quickly. And Tomasz PAPT says, does coaching deserve some blame? I don't think so, because as you mentioned, Hunter, the Penguins didn't play a terrible third period. I think that if they get one or two decent saves, then the Devils don't get motivated to continue to push it. Now, there were a couple of passes that went right through the home plate area, if you will, the Royal Road, as you hear goalies talk about. If you pass it through the middle of the ice, it makes it very difficult for the goalie to make a save. Foot's goal was one that was right in that category too. So there were a couple where the defense was lax for sure, and it's not like they played as well in the third period. But it's amazing what one or two saves can do for sure. And if Sharon Govich doesn't score that shorthanded goal, this probably ends 6-1 or 7-2 or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he had a great rush past Letang. I honestly thought Letang played that as well as he could, but Sharon Govich just had a hell of a move there and was able to put that blocker side on Jarry. I've really liked watching him this season in his rookie campaign. I think if it weren't for Kaprizov and a couple others, he would be getting a lot more Calder Trophy love. And, not playing on the New Jersey Devils also helps too. He's been a nice player to watch. But yeah, I agree. If he doesn't score there, I think that was only the Penguins' fourth shorthanded goal they've given up this year, which I think is among the league leaders for some of the least amount for shorthanded goals for teams that have given up. So it's not often you see the Penguins allow shorthanded goals. And like I said, I completely agree with you. That doesn't go in. We probably do not see Tristan Jarry give up 6 goals in that third period. I mean, maybe he gives up a couple more, but I think it's probably maybe a 6-3, 7-3 final. And this all goes back to the point, Matt, that I've been saying on the podcast. For whatever reason, the Devils give the Penguins fits. I know Pittsburgh overall is 4-1-1 against them this year. In layman's terms, they're 4-2. If you take the overtime loss and just put it in a regular loss, 4-2. But despite that, this is it's so weird that a team like the Devils, who, they're only a few points out of being in last place. I think the Sabres are only 3 points behind them because they've actually been playing some better hockey since they made some deals. For whatever reason, just the Devils play Pittsburgh hard. It's been like that the last few seasons, and I don't know what to make of it. Like I said, those first 2 periods tonight was probably the best I've seen them play against the Devils this season, and I know they played well against them in the games in Newark last week. And in the third period, it was just like, wow, those were the periods that I saw them play against New Jersey in the first couple matchups of the season against them. So it's something that just drives the Penguins nuts when they have to play them. They still have 2 matchups remaining against them. Those still need to be wins. At the end of the day, though, a win is a win. You obviously want to correct the errors that happen in the third period. You want to have your goalie not give up 6 goals. But with this win, if you look at the bigger picture and you want to be a little positive, they're now 9 points up for a playoff spot. The New York Rangers got blown out tonight by the Islanders. Both teams have 10 games to go. Now the standings, I think the Capitals and the Islanders are tied at first. Pittsburgh just 1 point behind both of them. And Matt, I don't know if you saw, both those teams will play each other in a 3-game series starting on Thursday. So potential big run here for the Penguins coming if they can get some results and start playing for a full 60 minutes.
Penguins can still very easily win the East Division. In fact, I'm not sure I'd pick against them at this point. So I don't want to take this too far to the negative, and I don't want to go too far into minus town with the analysis on tonight's game. Just for the fact that when you build that 6-0 lead, you're doing a lot right, and they certainly did that tonight. They are now just 1 point behind the Caps and the Islanders. And as you mentioned, well, every matchup this season is within the division, but we're going to see some high leverage matchups here coming up this weekend, while the Penguins still have 2 more against the Devils, and both of those are at home. So opportunity by the end of this weekend, they could be in first place by multiple points. In fact, if you just look at how some of these results can go. And you brought up the matchup issue against the Devils. I think it's really interesting that the worst the Penguins have looked, I believe, in these season series against their divisional foes have been against the Devils and the Rangers, 2 young, quick teams that can match their speed. And when you match the Penguins' speed, then in a lot of ways, it gets thrown into the mix. And it's a lot of 50-50 pucks, and it depends on who wins those and depends on who makes the big plays once things break down. And the Penguins still have good records against the Rangers and the Devils, but they haven't been easy games necessarily. And this one was looking like it was going to be an easy game. Do you think there's any merit to that argument, though? Because I like them in matchups against the Capitals, the Bruins. Well, Bruins pre-Taylor Hall. I guess we'll see afterward. Even the Islanders, the Flyers, some teams that can't quite match their pace, and they can play their game more easily against those teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But the funny thing is, though, Matt, they went 6-2 against the Rangers this season, even though the Rangers did give them some fits in a couple of those games. And, obviously I think the Rangers are a lot further ahead than the Devils are in the rebuild. I actually think the Rangers are a playoff team as soon as next year. They just got off to a really rocky start, had some situations that unfolded, especially with Tony DeAngelo and other stuff like that. But if they didn't get off to that kind of start, I think they would be in the playoff race right now. But yeah, it's just they're more younger, quicker teams that just, like you said, they seem to give them fits. The Islanders, they're a bit bigger. They're not as faster. They play more of a tougher game than the Penguins, and just Pittsburgh matches up better against them. And so does Washington. When you watch them, their speed doesn't jump out at you, but they're big, they're physical, and that's just, I know the Penguins have struggled against them a little bit at times, but they're still 4-2 against them this season. So yeah, I think I would agree with you in that assessment. It's weird that they've struggled against the Flyers this year, even though they're not really one of those big physical teams. I think they're 2-3-1 against them overall, but they're still one of those younger teams as well. They have a lot more prospects coming, I think, too. And I know they have some older guys as well, but for whatever reason, Pittsburgh has not matched up well against them either. But yeah, like I said, I agree overall with that assessment. And hopefully that they can continue winning against the Devils these last 2 games, as all these points are precious with 10 games to go.
Right. We talked about all season how they have all these games against the Devils and the Sabres at the end of the season. And as we saw on Sunday, especially when the schedule maker doesn't do you any favors, they're not slam dunk 2 points. And I like the Devils a lot more earlier in the season. They've slumped recently. They've won just 2 of their past 13 now after tonight's loss. And the Sabres look like the team that might come up and bite you at the end of the year, even though they're well out of the playoffs and were the first team to be eliminated this season. So all that bears mentioning. We have a question, too, from Steeler Nation, again, 412, asking, which team would you say is more of a threat come playoff time, Islanders or Caps? I would say Islanders, says Steeler Nation, and I, Matt, would also say the Islanders. Even though the Penguins have gotten results, they've all been close games this season for the most part against New York. And it's a Barry Trotz team. They're going to play structured. They're going to be disciplined. And as long as they get decent goaltending, which they have and they haven't this year, Varlamov crapped the bed a couple of times against them, I recall. But if they get decent goaltending, though, Hunter, the Islanders still feel like at least a co-favorite in the East for me once the playoffs come around. So I'd pick the Islanders there over the Caps. No disrespect to Washington. We haven't seen Anthony Mantha yet with them. But going on track record the last couple of years, it's hard to pick against New York.
I would say the Islanders as well. I know, like you said, they just got Mantha, and he's been pretty good since getting there. 4 goals, I think, in 4 or 5 games. They paid a hefty price to get him. Jacob Verana is no slouch. I mean, the underlying numbers are very similar between the two. Heck, that could end up being a bad trade for the Capitals a few years down the road. But, they're in it to win it right now. They only have a couple more years, I think, before Ovechkin finally decides to slow down a bit. But yeah, I think definitely the Islanders are more of a threat. I've always found the Capitals to be a bit overrated this year. I like their forward depth, but defensively, I would take Pittsburgh over them, and I would take the Islanders over them as well. And I think goaltending, when the Islanders' goaltending is on, I would take it over Washington's as well. And, we all saw what the Islanders did last season in the playoffs. They embarrassed the Capitals. They beat the Flyers, and then they gave Tampa all they can handle. That series almost went 7 games, if I recall correctly. So that's not a team to trifle with. But I still think the Penguins match up really well against them overall, especially with what we saw on the season against them.
Here's an amazing stat. Just came across the old Twitter wire from ESPN Stats and Info. ESPN, the future home of the NHL, by the way, or at least co-owners of the broadcast rights. The Penguins are the first team in NHL history, that always gets your attention, to win a game in which they were outscored by 5 goals in the third period. Yes, the Devils outscored them 6-1 in the third tonight, and that has never happened where the team that was doing the outscoring by 5 or more in the third lost the game. NHL teams were 0-2-70 and 0 in the regular season and 0-9 in the postseason when they were outscored by 5 or more in the third. So they made history.
History in a good way, I guess, is the way to say it. But yeah, that's that crazy stat. What was it you said? 0-270 or something like that.
0-270
wow.
until tonight.
I don't even know how that's possible. Like you said, it's great that they had that 5-goal first period and then added one in the second period. But geez, yeah, I mean, you're lucky you're on the right side of history there. That's for sure.
All right, there were positives tonight, despite the goaltending, despite some lackadaisical play in the third period and losing focus, letting your foot off the pedal, whatever metaphor you want to use. I wanted to talk about Evan Rodrigues with you, and you mentioned him on Twitter tonight. I brought him up as well. He was feeling it on that blind behind-the-back drop pass to Teddy Bluger for the 5th goal, and he ends up scoring the 6th goal himself there late in the second period. And it's amazing, isn't it? I talked about this with Conrad Waite of Duquesne Hockey last week. It's amazing when players are placed in positions in the lineup where they're supposed to be, and they're not stretching and playing more minutes and playing with superior players, but also playing against superior competition. More to the point, you get Evan Rodrigues in a situation where he's going up against the third best forward line or the second or third best defense pair. He's getting some power play minutes and chipping in there too. He's not a bad player. He was a good college player at Boston U. Always liked him there. And I did admire his game from afar with Buffalo, despite playing in a bad situation. We saw some spark late last season before the COVID break too. Didn't play in the playoffs, but here we are now and put together a pretty good stat line in his first full season as a Penguin. So what do you think about his game since he got dropped down from that Crosby winger role, which we all knew that was above his pay grade?
Yeah, I think Jesse Marshall had a good tweet about this after I tweeted about him. I think the fan base wanted to like Evan Rodrigues when he was up there, but then, we quickly realized we did like him when he's not on the top line with Sidney Crosby, Jake Guentzel. I don't know why Mike Sullivan decided to do that, but it was not working. Yeah, I think that was the main reason. But, but even when they were healthy, he was still up there for whatever reason. Even when Captain started out his first couple games, didn't really understand it. But Evan Rodrigues is exactly what, he is. He's a 12th forward on a contending team, and he gives you good value. I've seen people, a couple of my friends have texted me, well, he doesn't score enough. It's like, I think his playmaking ability more than makes up for that, and I like his play in the defensive zone. You saw that awesome pass for Teddy Bluger's goal tonight, Matt, just beautiful behind the back, and then Bluger basically just has a tap in from like 5 to 10 feet out. On a nightly basis, I've just really liked his play overall these last 3 to 4 weeks. And, it's probably going to come down to him or Radim Zohorna for that last spot in the playoffs, I think, for Pittsburgh. And I think you'd be foolish to go against Rodrigues with how he's played.
Yeah, he brings a little more to the table. Even though I am a Zahorna fan overall, he's shown some things, especially with the size, right? That catches your eye with the ability to skate like he does. But Rodriguez overall, more well-rounded player, I would say. And now, after a 2-point night here, he has 7 goals and 7 assists for 14 points in 30 games this season and a 3-game point streak. In fact, he scored in both the games against his former team, the Sabres, over this past weekend. Also, Hunter Jeff Carter is on the board officially. A bit of a misplay from the Devils. They were all over the place in the first period, and the Penguins took advantage. But Jeff Carter, I hate to say a long time coming because this is what his third or fourth game as a Penguin. But he's had some scoring chances. He gets one to go in here with a lucky break. That's hockey sometimes. Maybe you miss a great opportunity and then get one handed to you a couple of games later if you just keep showing up in the right spots. And he has. I've been impressed. It seems like most shifts that he takes, he makes a play that's value added. So maybe the adrenaline wears off at a certain point, but I can't say that I'm at all displeased with the early returns on the Jeff Carter deal, even though it took him 4 games to get his first goal.
Yeah, I've really liked his game overall. I was reading a tweet, I think, earlier in the day from Danny Shower-Irving, who, of course, has been on Pittsburgh Postgame.
Yes, friend of the show.
Very good friend of the show. I think his Corsi and the expected goals for overall through this little small sample was like 65, 66%. He's always been one of the best volume shooters in the league. And you saw that tonight, just got a prime scoring chance from 10, 15 feet out, made no mistake with it, gets his first goal with the Penguins. I think this was a long time coming. You saw just with his first few games here, you could sense that a goal was imminent. And I actually went on the Tip of the Iceberg podcast today, and I made the prediction that he was going to score tonight. I actually got something right for a change. So, I'll do a little golf clap for that. But I like him at center more than I do at wing. And I still prefer that even when Malkin and Kapanen come back as well as Tanev, because you can still move McCann up with Malkin and Kapanen, and then you can have Jason Zucker next to him with Evan Rodriguez, who has been playing really well lately. So I understand why people would prefer him at wing, but just you can see how he fits naturally at center. He's played that position for almost his entire career. And I would prefer to keep him there down the home stretch and into the playoffs.
And speaking of complimentary players, Teddy Bluger now 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists in 5 games since his return from injury. You have Jeff Carter, you have Teddy Bluger, and if you get Malkin back, he's skating, by the way. We got news of that today, and Mike Sullivan saying that there is a timetable for Malkin and Kasperi Kapanen, but they're just not going to reveal it to us. Typical stuff, but putting that out there, we know that they are improving. We saw some footage on the AT&T Sportsnet broadcast as well that showed them looking pretty spry out there. So there's reason for optimism. And with the Penguins, roughly 12 or so games to go in the regular season here, a little less than a month before the playoffs are scheduled to begin, then you've got to start looking to getting these guys back in the lineup and getting them at least, 4 or 5 games, I would hope, would be a minimum at this point. I'm not sure what we could aim for because, as I said, it's all up in the air. But the greater point being, if you keep Carter at center, which I wasn't sure he was going to be able to handle, but so far so good, then the 4 centers down the middle, Crosby, Malkin, Carter, and Bluger, that's pretty good for a team that I think had struggled with forward depth earlier in the season. Suddenly, if Malkin is back, big asterisk by that one. But if he is, I don't know how many teams have better center depth, honestly.
That's probably only maybe 4 to 5. I think I can honestly count off the top of my head. It's not very big. That's for sure. I think this would honestly be the deepest Penguins team that we have seen since they won the Cups in 2016, 2017. I think that 2018 team was a bit flawed, obviously, just because Derek Brassard was kind of a flop when he came over. I mean, I would still make that trade 10 out of 10 times at that time, but it's just the fit wasn't there. And then 2018-19, that team wasn't in. And then last year, it looked good on paper, but that McCann, Marlowe, Hornquist line was just a total disaster in the playoffs. That depth was just not good. But the depth has been overall surprisingly good. Even the players that are going to be coming out of the lineup, Matt, I think have been a lot better than we thought they would be. I mean, you saw Zahorna in his very short sample, I think was almost a point per game player in those first 4 to 5 games. Colton Sevier really came on a little bit during the couple games against New Jersey. Went on waivers, scored 3 goals in his next 2 games. Anthony Angelo, I thought, was playing all right. I know Jankowski has struggled for most of the season, but I thought he had been starting to play a bit better. I don't think he's obviously going to be in the lineup come playoff time. That's just not going to happen. But, I've really liked the depth overall from some of these 13th, 14th forwards. I mean, Sam Lafferty with Stanley, he has not been good for basically the entire year. But it's been fun to see some of these little depth players actually step up. And I can't wait to see, the 3 big forwards come back because, like I said, this team is going to be, I think, personally, the deepest team in the East Division when healthy.
You brought up Lafferty. I wanted to mention this tidbit from Penguins historian Bob Grove. Follow him at BobGrove91 on Twitter for all those tidbits you were used to getting on the radio broadcast when he was the pre- and post-game host. But Sam Lafferty did not play a single shift in the third period, despite the Penguins entering said third period, leading by 6. So that tells you about where the confidence level is for Mike Sullivan and Lafferty. He's got the raw tools, Hunter, but he just doesn't put it all together, makes some poor decisions. And it seems to be a training camp stud. He was the training camp #1 star last summer before the resumption of play. And we saw more from him in that black and gold scrimmage here before the start of this season back in January. But, that's one thing. And another is putting it together in regular season and obviously, hopefully at some point, playoff action for him. I'm not sure it's going to be there. So if there is an odd man out among the current group, I'd have to say it's Lafferty over even someone like Jankowski because he kills penalties, takes faceoffs at the very least, and he can contribute something there. It doesn't appear to be a guy who's going to make a huge error necessarily. That's what you want from the fourth liners. Actually, is not to be a negative. You don't have to be a positive, but just move the chains and get the next line on there. At least that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, you just the fourth line gets the least amount of ice time minutes per night anyway. Though even with that, I feel like Lafferty has made a lot of blunders this year in his he gets 8-9 minutes of ice time a night, basically. So it's just he's just not someone that I would want to obviously see in a playoff game. I mean, honestly, I think he's probably better served as a 14th or 15th forward. I would have Zahorna over him personally with the playoff roster, and even on potentially Colton Seaver or Anthony Angelo. I just have not seen enough from Sam Lafferty. Obviously, the big thing with him is his speed, but the rest of his game is just not there. So I'm not really sure if he's a free agent after the season. I have to double check that to be sure. But it just hasn't worked out here with him. But, luckily, like I said, he probably won't be in the lineup too much longer. I did see Sullivan, you touched on this a little bit earlier. I believe Sullivan said today that they have soft target dates in mind for when Kapanen and Malkin are coming back. So it's probably within a few more games until, some of these players start coming out of the lineup, Lafferty included.
10 games left. I said 12. It's actually 10 games left, 5 in this month and 5 in the month of, almost said April, May. We're playing into May in the regular season this year for the first time ever. So keep that in mind. Time is a wasting. And as you know, we got past that last 3-day break without a game last week. After this point, the longest break is going to be 2 days. And then we're trucking headfirst into the postseason. As I said, Penguins could be the top seed. They could be as low as 4. Doesn't look like they're going to finish out of the playoffs, though. So it's time to shift into that looking ahead mode. And to that end, folks, as you would imagine, Hunter, are focusing more on that third period than the first 2 periods that had everybody celebrating. And all the lucky fans who made it to PPG Paints Arena were certainly enjoying the action live. Mike Sullivan, first of all, maybe the most important reaction, he said after the game today, per Matt Wenzel of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, quote, "I've never been through an experience like that. It's not an easy one to react to," end quote. Sounds like a guy who just saw a ghost. Kate, Pittsburgh fan on Twitter, says that was a disaster. Jari stunk, and the team in front of him was on cruise control. That was one of the most embarrassing Pens games I've ever witnessed, and they won, by the way. That's my addition, not Kate's. Thank you for the input, Kate. That's most of what I'm getting here, Hunter, is negative stuff, and I understand it. It's if you're looking for reasons to be concerned, following up the Buffalo game with a complete letdown in the third period. Like we said, though, we think it's at least half on the goaltending as opposed to the team in front of him. And goaltending, it's important, but it's one player. That's easier to correct than an entire team. perhaps being Swiss cheese. At times they were, but at times they weren't. And that sort of thing can snowball. It's almost tough, like we saw in Philadelphia this year too, Hunter, with Carter Hart. He started letting in some goals, and then they started playing worse in front of him. And next thing you know, they're giving up 9 to the Rangers, and everything's falling apart for him.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, it was just, I understand a lot of the negative feedback coming from the fan base tonight. It obviously, those last 20 minutes well overshadowed the first 40 minutes where they were basically flawless. I did see a couple of tweets though, when we talked about this earlier on. If they don't, I think the shots basically for that third period were 11-11. They just get 2 or 3 timely saves. This game's a blowout, and no one is really talking about this. And yeah, you said that quote from Sullivan. Yeah, it almost just seems to be like he's kind of in shock that they just went through that. He must have ripped them after the game and then got cool, calmed down a little bit, had a glass of water, and then just came to the media and just like, yep, I'm just basically in shock. So hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. Or if it does, Matt, we can be 2-270 when giving up 6 goals in a period and still winning.
Penguins win. Yes, they won 7-6. If you just watched the third period, I think you'd have a hard time believing it, but they did. They had enough of a cushion, and they held on. We're past the 30-minute mark here, Hunter, so I'm going to get a little bit fun and goofy with this one. I want to talk about hockey uniforms, and I was looking at the Devils uniforms tonight, and I think it's pretty easy just because of how the Devils built their dynasty, if you want to call it that, 3 Stanley Cups, more than most teams, on solid defensive play and really boring hockey in a lot of ways, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. But you know what, that uniform, I think it's low-key one of the best in hockey, if not the best in sports. The number font is very unique. It's a cool-looking uniform. The logo is great. It's got N and J plus 2 devil horns on it. I don't know who designed it, but they deserve a raise 30, 40 years later. It took them a while to get going after they moved from Kansas City, but it's a classic, I would say. And usually I like the Penguins in a uniform matchup against other teams, but against the Devils, it's pretty tight. What say you on the very important subject of the uniform matchup?
I'm still going towards the Penguins just because I love their home uniforms, but their road ones I think are better than the home ones right now.
Yeah,
that's the big thing. But the Devils ones are always nice. One of my favorite uniforms, they're St. Patty's Day ones that they've done for many years. That is probably one of my favorite uniforms of any sport. They are just so flawless in basically every way. I do love their jersey, but like I said, I'm still on the Penguins, especially if they bring back a couple of their throwbacks. Like, I would love the Robo Penguin to come back. That would just catapult them further up the uniform rankings. But I mean, maybe call me a homer, call me a little biased. I'm still on the Penguin train there with uniforms. Though I will say the Devils uniforms are in the upper 8th of the league. That's for sure.
Upper 8th. Okay. I like that.
Top third.
Another topic in that ballpark, the reverse retros. I was skeptical, thought they were a little too plain when I first saw them, but outside of the weird penguin without the triangle on the shoulders, I think they're really good, actually. And I've liked seeing the Penguins wear white at home occasionally, too. I miss that. And as someone like myself who just barely missed the era when they actually wore the dark uniform that this one is based off of, the predominantly black uniform with a diagonal Pittsburgh down the chest, it's been fun to see them in a different look without the Penguin crest. I've never seen them in a jersey like that live until this season. And I actually thought in some games, even against the Bruins, I like their, the Bruins get a lot of hype for having a great uni. I think the Penguins have outclassed them in a couple of these matchups here. So, when it's black and gold against black and gold, it always looks a little bit like an intra-squad scrimmage. But overall, though, my greater point being that I feel like I'm raising my ranking. I had the Penguins in maybe the bottom third of the league for the reverse retros before I saw them on the ice, but it just goes to show you got to see them in action before you really make an assessment.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't really like them as much to start, but then I really warmed up to them when I saw them. Just when they practiced with them, I was like, okay, these look pretty sweet. Actually ended up getting one for the holidays. I ended up getting a Malkin one right up in my room. I'm a couple floors up. So they're a lot better now. I think now that they've all especially worn them in actual games and not practice, I think that they are in the upper third for the league in terms of overall. I mean, I'm not going to say they're like top 5 overall. I mean, I think there's quite a few that are much more sweet. The Hartford Whalers one is incredible. I love the Wilds one, the Kings one. I mean, the Ducks, I think, have a great one as well, but that throwback is incredible. But I still like the reverse retro ones, and I would love, Matt, just bring the original one back of Snoop Dogg just riding his bike down. I'd love to see that in game action again. Hopefully it's next season they do that. That'd be great.
You might have to wait one more season. It seems like they typically want to hold these for 2 years. I've just liked the fact that NHL teams, which are always going for the sleek and the sick look, but they've been able to maybe not go silly, I guess, with the exception of the Anaheim Ducks. That's pretty silly looking uniform, but they've taken some risks here with this, and so I applaud Adidas for maybe pushing them a little bit more than usual. You know which one I really like is the one you mentioned, the LA Kings, but it's kind of sad. It's tinged in melancholy for me because they wear those 5 or 6 times, and you're like, wow, the forum blue, as they call it, the purple and gold. Why are they not wearing this all the time? They have the most boring uniform in sports otherwise. And I always hated when the Kings were winning and they're putting this jersey combo on display. It's black and white with just a touch of silver, and the whole thing is just it's a clunker for me. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're inspired and they go back to wearing purple at home and gold on the road. That would be terrific.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Like I said, I prefer those over a lot of the other reverse retros. Another one I think is more underrated, Matt, the Caps one. That Screaming Eagle was always a big throwback way back in the day. I love seeing those when I used to play NHL 06 on my PlayStation 2 way back when. I mean, those were the days. I really do like that one. I think the Rangers one is honestly not that bad either. Like I said, I think my personal favorite is the Hartford Whalers one. That's just you can't go wrong with that.
That one's a little sad too because they lost their team, and I feel a little weird about rubbing their noses in the fact that the remaining Whalers fans, if there are any, I'm sure there are, but maybe they picked up other teams in the meantime. That's the only problem with that one. I'm a big fan of green; it's my favorite color. So yeah, Hartford Whalers, Minnesota Wild, they're usually among my top tier.
Dallas Stars too. I think theirs is pretty green as well, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen it in action in forever now, but
it's the all white. It's a little much for
me,
but their fluorescent black with the fluorescent green is something else. That's a type of a look I've never seen in pro sports. So I got to hand it to them there. Even though that's not reverse retro, I think that's one of my standouts for our NHL fashion show, as we're talking about here.
Yeah, and of course, you cannot forget the Arizona ones. Those are top tier, I think, as well. Bringing that back.
Yeah, I always like that old green model, and they switched it over to the purple, which is fine. But the throwback Coyote appears to be popular down there. They're wearing that a lot more often. I know that much. One last comment here from John Smith from the whimsical category. He says, Matt, you look like Polish mafia with your hair tied back. I wouldn't mess. Funny you mentioned that, John. I'm wearing my Polish AF shirt tonight, so we're going to wrap it up with that. Moving on.
I only have the Pittsburgh clothing company one when Brandon Tanev uttered the sheriff quote that has the bad word blurted out. So I had to bring that jersey out for the first time.
So we both have borderline profanity on our shirts tonight for
yes
for Postgame. We're playing blue.
Exactly.
I love it. Hey, it's YouTube. FCC can't touch us over here. That's the beauty of it. Any other thoughts here? 3-game series. We got to see 2 more of these. I was thinking, boy, it's going to be a snoozer. Maybe not after the 3rd period tonight. I'm not sure how it carries over. One thing I will stand by, I want to see Casey DeSmith in net on Thursday.
I think I'm there too, Matt. I think Tristan Jarry needs to be taken, taken to school a little bit by Mike Buckley and Mike Sullivan. Have a rest day. Honestly, Matt, I think I'm in the camp now. I'd go DeSmith, and then throw him to the Wolves against Boston. See how he responds against the Bruins. The Bruins are hot right now. I get it. They've won, I think, 4 or 5 in a row since the trade deadline, if I'm not mistaken, since getting Taylor Hall. They're still 3 points back of Pittsburgh right now. Those 2 matchups are obviously crucial. I mean, that can really just say who's going to get 3rd or 2nd in the division potentially. They've really come alive. I've been saying it for a while now. These are the 4 teams that are making the playoffs. The Rangers had that nice little run. They beat the Devils 4 times. People got a little too confident. They got blown out tonight. But, yeah, going back to the goalie talk, I would do DeSmith these 2 games against New Jersey. give Jari a rest, work out those kinks, especially with playing the puck. He's been like Marc-Andre Fleury on steroids with playing the puck, I think, these last few weeks, giving me those throwbacks to 2013 and 2012 and 2014 against the Blue Jackets, that it's like, I don't want to see that again. So just have him work out those kinks and, like I said, throw him to the Wolves against Boston. I think that's the play.
Back-to-back situation. So you're going to see both goalies this weekend, regardless of what happens. The series against the Devils ends Saturday afternoon, 12:30 p.m., and then Boston comes in. At least you don't have to travel, but that's a 3 p.m., so it's not much more than a 24-hour break between games there, and a couple of back-to-backs, in fact, coming up before the end of the season, and no more two-day breaks. I was talking about that earlier. So there you go. You're going to have to use both goalies anyway. I would not mind seeing 5 and 5. And if the Smith plays better, maybe 6 and 4. Who knows how it all goes? Not that it's all on the goalie, but that's the way we saw it, at least from the third period tonight. Penguins win at 7-6. They make history in getting outscored by 5 in the third and winning. Hey, it was fun talking to you, Hunter, again. Fun talking to all of you as well and taking some of your input via YouTube, via Facebook, via Twitter. Another edition of Pittsburgh Postgame in the books. Go to Pittsburgh Sports Live, like and subscribe, and sign up for those notifications by clicking that little bell icon underneath the video that you see here, so you know when we're going live. Not every game, but pretty close to it as we get closer to the end of the regular season and prepare for the playoffs. Hunter, where can they find your genius online?
Thank you. Genius is a nice word for it. Most of my takes are freezing cold ones. Anyways,
Twisted genius.
A little bit. At Hunter Hodies on Twitter. The Locked On Penguins podcast is on Apple, Spotify, Megaphone, but Apple, Spotify is what most people use nowadays. Anyway, I do stuff for Last Word on Hockey. Did a Jeff Carter article last week. Have a couple other things coming down the pipeline as regards to writing with that. And yeah, it's mainly all the work that I do, and I try to live tweet every Penguins game. As it's pretty crazy, Matt. We're about 2.5 weeks away from the playoffs starting, just about.
Few folks have a better handle on Penn's social media as you, Hunter. That's why I like to talk to you as well, because it seems like you don't miss a tweet, especially during the games. I'm always trying to frantically catch up depending on my availability. But there you have it. Paying attention, keeping our finger on the pulse for you. We'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Postgame. Have a great rest of your week.